You're listening to Answers for the Family with Alan Cardoza, right here on LA Talk Radio.
Greetings to all of you listening around the world, and a warm welcome as we bring you another edition of the Answers for the Family radio show. I'm your host, Alan Cardoza, and each week this show will address issues such as family crisis intervention, building self-esteem, dealing with addictions, and many things that will improve our lives. Now, having over 30 years experience working with families in crisis, I've been fortunate to meet and work with some of the top professionals in many of the helping fields and skilled authors who are working to make this world a better place for all of us. Now, for everybody out there, I'm looking for some show ambassadors who will forward at least one of our shows to your social media group and to someone you know that can benefit from a particular show. And I can tell you right now, you're all going to know somebody that can benefit from this show. And I want everybody to know that if you can do this, I truly appreciate it. And it's just another way that we as a group can make a positive difference in the lives of others. Now, our topic today is staying focused in a hyper world, which is also the title of one of our guests' many informative and transformational books. For the past 30 years, our guest has taught us how we are different and given us new insights in better communication and stronger relationships. He is now adding that we need more than new communication skills and understanding of our differences to have healthy relationships these days. We also need the nutritional support necessary for positive moods, sustained energy, and most importantly, focus. So joining us is Dr. John Gray, the author of the most well-known and trusted relationship book of all time, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. You know, USA Today listed his book as one of the top 10 most influential books in the last quarter century. Now, in hardcover, it was the number one best-selling book of the 1990s. So Dr. Gray has written over 20 books that are translated in approximately 45 languages, and they're in more than 100 countries. His most recent book is Beyond Mars and Venus, and his Mars-Venus book series has forever changed the way men and women view their relationships. Now, as someone who has read many of John's books and referred others to do the same, I truly believe he has helped men and women better understand and respect their differences in both personal and professional relationships. His approach combines specific communication techniques with healthy nutritional choices that create the brain and body chemistry for lasting health, happiness, and romance. John has appeared repeatedly on Oprah as well as on the Dr. Oz Show, Today, CBS This Morning, Good Morning America, and many other shows. He has been profiled in Time, Forbes, USA Today, and People magazines. He was also the subject of a 3-hour TV special hosted by Barbara Walters. Again, as you can see, we're talking about someone who has really made a difference. Now, personally, John lives in Northern California with his wife, Bonnie. They've been married for over 30 years and have 3 grown daughters and 4 grandchildren. So as you can tell, he's an avid follower of his own health and relationship advice. John, welcome to Answers for the Family.
It's such a pleasure to be talking with you today. Thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. As I was preparing for this show and I was thinking, it seems to me that, there's about 4 shows here. So we're going to try to cover as much as we can, but just know that I'm really glad to have you. Now, one of the questions that came to mind right away was, as the foremost expert on relationship, what was your launching point to being on this specific path of focus or the lack thereof?
Well, I've been doing it 45 years, and I'm 66, and when I turned 50, I had early-stage Parkinson's. And, I have a relative who had Parkinson's, and it really just gets worse. The medications just treat symptoms, and the condition, you have to keep taking more and more medication. And so it's a downhill slope. So I'm a good researcher, so I focused on the research on natural solutions that actually work, and they don't, it doesn't go downhill. And, many cases when people have it progress, they can at least stop the progression without taking the drugs and using the natural supplements. And those studies are on PubMed. I list those references at my website. But if you're early stage, just simply extra nutrition, pretty simple thing you can do yourself, which is what I did, and reverse that. But when I did it, I realized that I had so much more focus in terms of getting rid of the old-fashioned ADD type symptoms. I didn't realize it even until then that I had ADD symptoms, but my tendencies, ADD can show up in many different ways. For me, it was, as a child, the cause for me was a concussion. There can be many causes, but a concussion. And, my mother had to pull me out of bed in the morning. I would procrastinate a lot, wait to the last minute, because what all these brain issues of focus have to do is inhibited dopamine function. Dopamine gives your brain pleasure and motivation and energy and so forth and focus. And so you resist following through. You can't, for women, it shows up quite differently. It shows up as the inability to stay focused on one thing. They tend to be overwhelmed, taking on too much and feeling stressed, and they can worry too much. They can feel, an ongoing anxiety, and that actually is the inhibited dopamine function. We see it most in little boys. I saw it in myself as, my wife be talking, and very quickly I'd shift gears and be thinking about something else. And suddenly I could just relax and listen to her. I didn't have to keep moving and moving and moving. So that's one of the benefits for me. And when I saw how much nutrition helped my relationship, because I had the skills down, I've been writing books on that for many, many years, had a great marriage, but it was work. This became so much easier to apply everything I taught with a few extra good specific nutrients that many people are missing today because of our diet, particularly the high-carb diet depletes us of certain minerals.
Well, and I know that there are multiple types of ADHD. Do the vitamins and minerals work essentially the same for all types, or would there be something different that would work better for one type of ADHD or another?
Well, there's basic support that works for all of them, and then, like in the book Staying Focused, I break it out into all the different types, a few extra type supplements that are particularly good to help. But for anybody, if we can think about the challenges we face today in marriage and parenting and raising our kids and so forth, it's just a whole new world. If we look at the more extreme mental illness, over the last 35 years, it's increased 35 times. If we look at suicide rates in boys, it's 8 times more than girls. Boys are, twice as many girls are now graduating from college than boys. These are things most people are not aware of. And in all subjects, girls are outdoing boys. Boys are following back. So there's a challenge for boys, which is why I wrote the book with Warren Farrell. We wrote a book called Boy Crisis, and we go into the detail what's happening with boys and some, practical solutions. Girls, we haven't written that book yet, but there's a girl crisis, which is they perform really well, but they don't feel the need for a relationship. They're not getting married. No man is good enough. They feel overwhelmed. They're taking 4 times as much antidepressants, and their stress levels are really high, and now they're having more heart attacks and health problems than males. So that's a new challenge that's happening on the other side of it. And I addressed a lot of that in my book, my most recent book called Beyond Mars and Venus, which once again, it goes into not just looking at our psychological differences, although that's very important, our hormonal differences. And, my approach is not always the standard, go take hormones. I believe our body can make the right hormones in most cases. We just have to shift certain behaviors and take certain supplements that are natural and to balance out, the high stress levels in our lives and the poor diet that we have.
So what I hear you saying is, and I'm one that has also recently had my hormones checked and things like that, and I'm fairly close to your age. So what you're saying is that we can get as much benefit or increase in balance of our hormones by just reducing our stress level as taking them, pharmaceutically. Is that what I hear you saying?
Well, balancing stress levels is one part of it. Often if you say that, it means nothing to anybody because they go, my life is just stressful. What we mean by it is our stress reaction inside. All of our lives are stressful today, but at least for most people, it's how do you react to that? What's your biological response to that? How much adrenaline are you making? How much cortisol are you making? Because whenever you're making adrenaline and it doesn't quickly turn off, then what happens is your body makes cortisol, which is more long-lasting, and it throws your hormones out of balance. For women, it makes them more masculine, and for men, it makes them more emotional and throws them out of balance. And for what's happening with men is when your cortisol levels are chronically high, your testosterone levels start dropping. And now it's become the national average that the 50-year-old has half the testosterone he has as a young man. And so, you see all these ads and everything for take testosterone, go to this clinic, take testosterone, and it's disastrous. You can look at all the side effects of it. Taking testosterone is taking steroids. That's why they're illegal. It's not healthy for you. Your body will break down over time, and you'll feel pain, and it won't work after a while. So the positive side of it is that there's certain behavioral skills that I talk about in Beyond Mars and Venus to help boost testosterone. There's some natural supplements that help the body to detoxify the high estrogen levels so your body can rebuild testosterone. Estrogen is, when you're eating meat, if it's not organic meat, hormone-free meat, then if it doesn't say hormone-free organic, what they've done is they put estrogen in the meat and chicken. So we're taking estrogen all the time, and that's why you'll see boys now have much lower testosterone levels than they used to have. They're hitting puberty much later in many cases, and the average male at 35, his testosterone levels, even though they're already low, they're dropping down to half by the time he's 50. Now, this is not normal. If you go to other countries where they don't have our diet, they don't use pesticides in the food. Pesticides also register in your body as estrogen. So got to move into organic foods if you want to keep your testosterone levels or raise them back. What I've done is, putting into practice what I've just said. My testosterone levels at 66 are 50% higher than they were as a young man. And, this is just not your norm, but it's because I've specialized myself in understanding why our testosterone levels go so low, and B, relationship skills that will dramatically increase your testosterone. Well, like one simple thing. I have a successful relationship. I am successful in my life. That's a big boost for testosterone. But my wife, when I come home, for example, from work, if she's home, she always is happy to see me. And then she ignores me for a little while. And that is one of the best formulas for women to understand. Don't ask men a lot of questions. Don't ever face them with problems. He should always anticipate, almost like a parade when he comes home. It's not like a parade, but it's like the soldier comes back. He needs to anticipate, I'm being appreciated for what I did today. And I know there's some burnout women listening, and they're saying, why don't I get a parade? Well, if you get a parade, it increases your testosterone. Women, generally speaking, don't need more testosterone. What they need is more affection, more understanding, more caring, more support, more questions, more conversation. These are things that stimulate the female hormones, whereas the things that stimulate the male hormones is after a day of work, if he's had a stressful day, he needs to feel that it was worth it, meaning somebody's happy to see him. Then ignore him for 30 minutes, and that's where he goes to his cave. That's the standard Mars-Venus idea, because if a man can relax doing something he enjoys that doesn't require intimacy creates estrogen, then his testosterone levels will rebuild, and he'll have so much more to give to the relationship. So these are all strategies. So much of my work now is not just strategies for good relationship, but strategies and behavioral skills between men and women that can actually boost the right hormones in each one. See, if I'm listening to you and you're telling me about some of the stresses of your day, your estrogen levels will go up. Well, that's good for women. Women need 10 times more than men, and to be romantic, women need 20 times more than men, whereas men need the testosterone. If his estrogen goes up, if he talks too much about his feelings, his estrogen goes up, his testosterone goes down, and his mind starts looping on negative things rather than letting it go. So, I know it's a lot of information. These are all new ideas because we have new challenges in the world today.
Yeah. Wow. I'm sitting here thinking it's got me thinking about a lot of different things as it relates to relationships, but also as when we're working with some of the teens and the way in which they're reacting.
Oh my gosh. With teens, we feminize the males, okay? This is the problem today. It's already because of the non-organic meats, because of the estrogen going into their bodies, their testosterone levels drop. The pesticides register estrogen in their body. And so what that makes them is overly emotional. And males, when they're overly emotional, they become angry or they go into fight or flight, which only causes them to go further pulling away and shutting down. Every man has had that experience where you just, something upsets you so much you just shut down and you just don't care and you don't feel anything. That's your body's attempt to disconnect in order to lower the estrogen in order to rebuild testosterone. Now, see, psychology doesn't understand biology. We don't want these boys talking about their feelings at that time. We want to teach boys that when you're upset, you need to detach. It's okay to just do what men used to do, is forget it, don't worry about it, leave it alone, and then do something to use your muscles. If you do something to use your muscles, you burn off the adrenaline, first of all. Second, you start rebuilding your testosterone. Then, after you're feeling good, then you make jokes about what just happened. You've got to lighten up the subject. And still, then, if you still need to process it, that's when you talk about your feelings. Is men should not go deep down until they can make jokes about it, and they're not going to make jokes about it until their testosterone level rises up again. And this is just horrendous to many therapists. Now, if I'm a man and I have a loss and I'm upset about something, and I go to my therapist's office, well, generally I drove my car to get there. I'm managing in my life, so pretty much my testosterone's back up. So then it's a benefit to go into my feelings. But even then, it should be more along the line of Freudian therapy, where you're analyzing your emotions and challenging the thoughts that are giving rise to the emotions. So it's more of an analysis from a detached perspective, as well as to bring some feeling into it, of course. But for females, they need to first vent. They need to first go through layers and layers of feeling. Like if you're angry, you need to feel the disappointment, sadness. Then you need to go deeper and feel fears. Then you get in touch with your needs and wishes and wants. Then you start analyzing and challenging and finding out, how to be reasonable about it. So there's different processes for men versus different processes for women. We have to recognize this today. And it's more important today than ever before. Why? Because today our culture supports, and this is a good thing, this is really important, our culture supports women expressing their masculine qualities. Our culture supports men being more feeling, more emotional, more supportive, and doing more nurturing things. This is a step of progress. This is a good thing that any individual can express all parts of them, both what we'll call traditional male qualities or traditional female qualities. Now, the problem is when women become too masculine, they're having difficulty coming back to feeling love and happiness and joy. They have difficulty coming back and producing female hormones when they're making male hormones all day. So my work is to help women identify the symptoms of imbalance, coming back to the female, how to use your relationships to do that, how to make changes in your life to do that, so you're balancing the male and female side of you. And for men, they need to understand how to come back to the masculine side if they're feeling anger, irritability, anxiety, procrastination, inability to focus, all these problems that men are having, and also not being able to sustain arousal and a connection in their relationships. There are things we're doing today that are causing these problems, and there's choices we can make that will bring us back to feeling more centered as men, more confident as men, more focused, not procrastinating, not getting angry, not becoming irritable, not becoming grumbly. Depression, for example, depression in males, irritability in males, or even anger in males is always associated with low testosterone. Most people think it's high testosterone, but actually all those symptoms I just mentioned is testosterone converting into estrogen, which is what happens to men when their cortisol levels are elevated.
Now, to correct some of this stuff, what age do we need to start shifting? In other words, how early on can we make it? And it sounds like one of the things you're saying is to start off with is to change the diet so that we're not starting in the wrong direction. And it sounds like we should be starting that, at a pretty early age?
Oh, absolutely. One of the challenges when it comes to brain function is that the high carbohydrate diet that we have, when you're feeding kids lots of sugar and the sweets and the processed foods, one of the problems with that is it depletes the brain of the feel-good mineral. There's a mineral which is, I call the feel-good. Whenever you're really happy, like you had some ice cream. I'm not against those things. I'm just saying it's super moderation. We had a special day. We went to a theater with the grandkids and everything. I had ice cream, probably the first time in 7 months. But, we celebrate. We're out in the sun. You have fun. So occasional things, treats is fine. But when I had that ice cream, boy, did I feel good. Well, that feeling good is always producing a lot of dopamine and serotonin in the brain. And when you make those feel-good brain chemicals to a higher level, it depletes the brain of the feel-good minerals. One of those minerals is lithium. Lithium works together with calcium, magnesium, zinc, and potassium. They all work together to produce and regulate the production of dopamine and serotonin. We're most vulnerable when it comes to lithium, although we can run out of all of them if we're either high stressed, intense negative feeling, or intense positive feeling depletes the brain of these minerals. One of the reasons people become chronically depressed is because, well, as soon as you're depressed, it's the outcome of depletion of minerals, and you're not doing anything to increase your minerals. You just stay depressed, and if you get some minerals, you'll tend to have just intense feelings associated with the depression, which will deplete you even more. We have to recognize that every mood we have has a physiological foundation for it. And there's so much misinformation about lithium. Lithium is the most wonderful mineral, but the psychiatrists have given it in a form which doesn't work unless you give toxic doses. That's lithium carbonate. Only helps the most extreme imbalances of psychosis. It helps with that, but it helps with everything. But in order for it to work, they have to give 500 times the natural dose. So we can call it low dose. Actually, it's real dose, healthy dose of lithium is what anybody could use if they're under stress. And it's not the lithium carbonate. They have to give high doses of lithium carbonate because it doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier. Minerals don't cross the blood-brain barrier, period, if you're taking them as supplements. In food, they do. But our foods are usually deficient in it, and when we eat the processed carbohydrates, it depletes us of those minerals. So we have to balance by taking supplements, and Dr. Nieper figured out, he's a German doctor, if you bond lithium and potassium, calcium, zinc, any of those, to uric acid, it's a substance that's in mother's milk. If you take that uric acid, it's also in cow's milk, and they take that uric acid and they bind it to the minerals, it becomes a carrier and carries them across the brain, blood-brain barrier, and then you don't have to take toxic doses. But because psychiatrists use the lithium carbonate, people are afraid of it because all this research shows the side effects or negative side effects of taking lithium carbonate, not lithium orotate. And lithium carbonate is not bad either. It just doesn't work unless you give huge doses. And anytime you take any mineral in maximum doses, 50 times the dose, 100 times the dose, there's going to be side effects. Anything good taken too much is bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. So if we're making the adjustments early on, in the situations where the adjustments aren't being made, is this also taking us in that direction that we're having such an incredible increase in ADHD in young people?
Absolutely. ADHD actually starts for many children right in the womb. They've done research studies showing that if mothers take Tylenol during the pregnancy for 5 days, the risk of ADHD goes up 500%. Are dramatically increased. Even if autism goes up higher, 5 times as many boys as girls are having autistic symptoms. And this is like a epidemic that most people aren't aware of. Is the learning difficulties and challenges in boys is off the chart. And the most dramatic example is California is the highest. 1 out of 32 boys last year were diagnosed on the spectrum, autistic spectrum. That's 1 out of 32 children. This is like a disaster. Nationwide, it's about 1 out of 50 boys, and 5 times as many boys as girls. And a lot of this has to do with what happens in the womb, but a lot of it has to do with toxicity once they're out of the womb, and what we feed our children today. When the brain is developing, it's very crucial that we don't expose those kids to these toxic substances, whether they be heavy metals, drugs that have heavy metals in them, or it could be the non-organic foods, the high sugar content, the low zinc in the diet. Boys, possibly one of the reasons boys are more vulnerable to all of this is while their brain is developing in the first couple of years, their testosterone levels are twice as high as a girl. Not twice as high, as they're 30 times as high as a girl. They're like that of a grown man for the first 2 years, and in order to make that testosterone, the body uses up zinc. Now, zinc is the brain's neural protector as well from all the mercury and heavy metals in the environment. So boys are way more vulnerable to the heavy metal toxicity than girls, and that's possibly one of the conditions that's giving rise to the epidemic of autism. But much milder version of that is the ADHD one. So we've got, when I mentioned Tylenol, acetaminophen is the active ingredient in there that depletes the body of antioxidants. antioxidants also protect the brain from all this toxicity. And there's over 500 over-the-counter drugs that have acetaminophen in it. You know, you go to that drugstore and you give your kids the cold syrup or this syrup or digestive this, all those things. Look at it, you'll see acetaminophen is everywhere, and it is a poison. I mean, you have acetaminophen poisoning. You have to go to the hospital over 600 cases or something like that a year, and or a much bigger number than that. And what it does, it inhibits the body's production of something called glutathione, which is a super antioxidant that neutralizes free radicals. If you don't have enough glutathione, you get something called oxidative stress in the brain. There's over 100,000 studies on oxidative stress in the brain causing brain problems, from dementia to Alzheimer's to ADHD to memory loss, all these kinds of problems, to Parkinson's. It's glutathione, which is this antioxidant. We just have too many free radicals. And then once again, bad diet, sugar, junk food, pesticides, all that gives rise to higher levels of free radicals. And we need to have this glutathione, which your body makes. It's not. You can also take it. That helps. You can go online. You can see people with Parkinson's just getting an IV drip of glutathione. All their symptoms temporarily go away. I mean, gone. I mean, not all their symptoms, but they can't walk, they can't talk, and suddenly they can walk and talk within an hour. But it goes away the next day because they're not making that glutathione. So that's really important. In my book, Staying Focused, I talk about all these researched alternatives to taking ADHD drugs. ADHD drugs, I now list in the most recent book because the research keeps coming out. The 7 universities showing that they cause brain damage. Now, we didn't know that 18 years ago when New York Times came out and said it's a miracle, improve children's performance, take these drugs, parents give them to your kids, doctors read all that, doctors are, giving it out like candy. And now we see that, these are just low-dose cocaine and low-dose speed methamphetamines. Your brain works temporarily better, like every Hollywood writer knows. You get on speed and you write stuff, but there's side effects to it, and there's ways to do it without. You can still develop your full mental potential without having to take drugs. And parents need to know that brain injury occurs. The research says brain damage. I call it brain injury because I know I was able to reverse mine. And for thousands of people who've approached me and told me that these ideas had helped their children tremendously, dramatically, within days sometimes, you always will see dramatic improvement without taking the drugs. The drugs do cause brain injury. And just like why cocaine and methamphetamines are illegal and not good for you, that should be the case with Ritalin and Adderall. But unfortunately, parents don't know that.
Well, how do we get our bodies to naturally produce more glutathione? Because, for instance, when you were talking about the IV drip, okay, that part is great from the standpoint of it's temporarily doing it. You're saying the reason, I don't know that we can have somebody get an IV drip every day or however long it takes to wear off.
Definitely. No. We want to be able to, what I formulated for my own. See, when I got IV drips in order to reverse my Parkinson's. And then what I did, and I also, by the way, I took a substance which anybody can get called NADH. But you have to take high doses of it, 20 milligrams, 2 tiny little tablets twice a day, will have a huge impact on anybody to improve brain function because it oxygenates the brain. I did IV drips of that plus amino acids, and it reversed my symptoms of Parkinson's for about 2 months, I think it was, and then it came back. So I figured out a formula of how to make my body's own glutathione, and now lots of people do it. But 20 years ago when I developed this, not very many people did. I just did it by symptoms. Now we have huge research showing that undenatured whey protein, it's very high in an amino acid called cysteine. And you take that undenatured whey protein and make a superfood shake out of it. You add omega-3 to it. You put in some supplements. You put in some minerals. It's amazing to stimulate the production of dopamine in the brain, to restore normal dopamine function by the dairy protein has super high levels of cysteine that makes glutathione. It also has a protein called casein, which produces dopamine. Now, most kids today, most parents who have learning difficulties in their children know that dairy is really hard for them to digest. That's why this is undenatured whey protein, undenatured casein protein. That means it's not heat processed with pasteurization, high heat process. That kills the actual proteins to make them so they're not available to the brain. But even still, the casein is hard for these children to digest. All these kids have digestive problems. And so what happens is, what I figured out is this amazing formula is you take your undenatured whey protein. That means it's not killed by the high heat. Then you add enzymes to it. I have a premix with enzymes already in it. And you add water to it and let it sit for 40 minutes, 30 to 40 minutes. It will bubble up and it will digest itself, so it becomes pre-digested whey protein, casein protein, the perfect mix in order to produce glutathione, which neutralizes free radicals, and the prerequisites, the amino acids, are now digested to make dopamine and serotonin in the brain.
I love it. And for everybody out there listening, you can go to John's website, which is www.marsvenus.com, and he has a lot of information about this, because I know that right now we're getting a ton of information. I know some of you are out there, you're driving, you can't write all of this stuff down. Afterwards, it's an easy website to go to, marsvenus.com, or you can always go to the Answers for the Family website. We will have, a way that you can connect to do that. We're going to take a break right now, but everybody stay with us. Or if you're sitting at your computer, open up another window, follow along, go to marsvenus.com, and as John's talking about some of this, you can follow along with us. But stay with us. We'll be right back. You're listening to Answers for the Family.
Founded over 30 years ago to meet the needs of families in crisis, West Shield has continually focused on resolving issues that negatively impact families and businesses. Our signature therapeutic transportation service helps to ensure that adolescents in crisis are safely transported to specialized schools, programs, and treatment centers with unsurpassed experience and success. We are supported by our full-service licensed investigation agency that has legally, professionally, and compassionately located hundreds of runaways and teens. We are experienced and qualified to help, offering solutions which may include referrals to our international network of top professionals in the fields of educational consulting, psychology, psychiatry, and investigations. Simply put, West Shield Adolescent Services and West Shield Investigations are the best solutions when your family is facing a personal crisis. Call 1-800-899-8585. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's 1-800-899-8585. Or visit our website at westshield.com. Thank you.
And we're back. You're listening to Answers for the Family. Our guest today is Dr. John Gray, author of Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And we are talking about some of his other books, one of which is Staying Focused in a Hyper World. Now, John, in that book, you talk a lot about reaching like a greater consciousness. So, what do you mean when you say we have a greater consciousness of new possibilities, but we feel less connected in our relationships due to our loss of focus? Let's talk about this loss of focus that is affecting all of us.
When we lose focus, we start to value those things which are not important, as opposed to valuing those things that are important. See, focus is what we put our attention on, right? So if we don't have a clear focus on what's most important, what happens is now we're left with a void, and we keep seeking stimulation from things that aren't important, which become like addiction. And everything I've said about brain function and focus actually is a wonderful, wonderful solution for addiction. It all comes down to, even the way I figured out the solution for Parkinson's, I'd gone to Mexico to test out a alternative treatment for people with addictions. Because addictions is, once again, it's a dopamine challenge. It's where dopamine is the brain chemical that gives your brain pleasure and motivation. And when you have low dopamine function, then you take some substance that stimulates super high levels of dopamine function, like cocaine or heroin or alcohol for some people, then your brain makes you feel alive. You feel like you're supposed to feel to a certain extent, this aliveness, but you didn't make it yourself. And by high stimulation of dopamine, then it goes into another problem, which is desensitizing your dopamine receptors. That means that if you have high stimulation, then normal stimulation doesn't give you any dopamine, which makes you crave now higher stimulation, and the higher stimulation desensitizes the dopamine receptors, which means that life becomes even more boring, more flat, less alive, and depending on your temperament, you have ADHD-type symptoms, which would be hyper symptoms, either hyperactive, hyper-distracted, hypersensitive, hyper-compulsive, hyper-perfectionist, hyper-denial. Any normal human challenge becomes a hyper-challenge, and that's what we live in today, is a hyper-challenge. Women have always, had this more expanded awareness, which, takes in worries a bit more than men. But now it's like hyper. Women constantly are feeling overwhelmed. It's like a world they live in. There's never enough time. They can't find the energy to feel happy. They're overwhelmed. And not that every woman, but this is a common theme that as a therapist I see today, and my thousands of people I meet. It's become a part of our culture, so much so that the younger generation doesn't even know the difference. I mean, watch a movie that was made in 1940, and you'll be bored to death. But those people were very excited by it. They had a sensitivity to the peacefulness of life. Now, if you sort of relax, you feel bored. You have to have the TV on. You have to have loud music on. You have to be playing a video game. You have to be looking at your phone. This is our addictive world we live in. And it prevents us from having a certain level of depth and fulfillment in our relationships, and it prevents us from accessing that a desire for that which is most important, which is intimacy, which is vitality, which is health, which is happiness, simplicity. Our lives have become complex, not because life has to be so complex, is we make it that way because we're seeking this high stimulation of danger, of overwhelm. Ironically, the things we don't want often also stimulate dopamine. Pleasure does, sugar, sweets, desserts, eating, sex, all these kinds of things produce dopamine, but so does fear, so does danger. When we look at these poor kids who are in who are in gangs and do dangerous things and steal and hurt people, all of that is also an addictive substance. It literally, the brain becomes addicted to that. Worrying, the brain becomes addicted to it. Drama, we see it most dramatically in our soldiers that come back. Because when you're in the war zone, your dopamine levels shoot really, really high. It's aliveness. When you're in danger, you're fully alive. And then that produces cocaine levels of dopamine that desensitizes dopamine receptors, and now they come back and they're depressed, they're not motivated, their world is flat, there's no aliveness and there's depression, and they often commit more suicides than people die in the war. And that's because, they're basically not happy. They can't find the capacity to feel aliveness with normal life. And we talk about these kids at risk. We do that so much in the Boy Crisis book. And, there's so many different factors for that. But one of the major factors is, as I mentioned, this lithium. Lithium is literally anybody who's like depressive and suicidal. It is the mineral deficiency that gives rise to suicide feelings. You can have lots of problems but not want to kill yourself. But when you have lithium deficiency, literally brain cells are dying in your brain and you feel like you want to die. And any child, even close to depression or anxiety or suicidal, should be taking 25 milligrams of lithium orotate. That's the element lithium, plus there'll be 400 milligrams of orotic acid. It's just every little capsule usually has 4.5 milligrams of lithium. And that would be for emergency situations, but a daily dose is like 4.5 milligrams. Just a tiny, tiny bit bonded to orotic acid. I prefer the supermineral product, which is has the lithium along with the potassium orotate, calcium orotate, magnesium orotate, zinc orotate. What I've found is that over time, people feel better right away with lithium orotate, but the results are not always sustained because when your brain goes to a higher level of functioning, you now are working, you can easily become depleted in the other cofactor minerals. You also need sunshine, vitamin D. You also need greens. You need vitamin K2. These are all factors in working a trillion times a second in the brain. So much activity is going on. These nutrients are needed. And our lives are so out of balance with the high stress levels, the speed of life, the seeking of stimulation, the addictive tendencies we talked about. All of these things deplete brain minerals. And then now we're seeking the stimulation. We're coming from a void, which just, we find it, by looking at new and different, or worrying thoughts, violent thoughts, angry thoughts, any of those kind of things stimulate higher levels of dopamine, which just depletes us even more.
And John, how much is the media perpetuating this with the levels of negativity and hyperness? Because the hyperness, it's from the standpoint now is, if it's going to be 90 degrees in Southern California, it's going to be incredibly hot. It's going to be dangerously hot. Well, 20 years ago, 90 degrees wasn't dangerously hot, but now it's dangerously hot. If there's going to be rain, there's going to be this huge storm. Get off the streets. Okay, it was rain. It was rain 20 years ago. Now it's a storm. Everything seems to be raised to this higher level. How much of what the media is doing is keeping us at this level, which is adding to the stress or the ADHD that we're all feeling?
Well, yes, and our own ADHD feeds it. The media goes where people put their attention, and people become bored. If you had a station just had good news, nobody would watch it. They're just responding. The media is responding to our need for flashy, new, and different, and then it bumps it up, and then that makes us need more flashy news and different. I mean, they figured it out. They want people to watch their shows and whatever, and so, yeah, that feeds it. I just love it. My work is I get to travel a lot in my work, and like, for example, I just got back from 9 days in China, and when I'm in China, none of the TVs are in English, so I don't watch any TV. It's so refreshing to be able to come home without this need to look at the news and what's happening, the drama, the excitement. Your brain just wants to go to it, and if you just turn it off and don't see it, then you adjust. And that's something I haven't mentioned that I mentioned in Boy Crisis, which is one of the solutions, which is anybody can recognize, is with this ADD type symptom and all these problems that come from imbalanced brain function. High stimulation is a part of our life. If it doesn't have to damage the brain, if we follow it with low stimulation. See, it's like dopamine stimulation is like if you look into the sun, your pupils will constrict. But if you go back into darkness, your pupils will open up again. It's the same thing with these neural receptors in the brain. If you have high dopamine stimulation, something exciting happens, you have a nice dessert or whatever, yeah, a lot of dopamine gets produced, and now your receptor sites will close down. Now you'd have to experience a relaxation. This is why meditation is now being taught in schools. It's such a good thing. To relax, to meditate is a really good thing. And it's kind of like disciplined boredom until people learn to upregulate those receptor sites again. And then what people normally experience as boredom is actually peace, relaxation and peace of mind. Many people don't even know what that means. They either bored or they have to be stimulated and stimulated. But meditation is something that people can do. Talking about feelings, particularly for girls, is very, very important. Is not to get stuck in just the feelings, but to articulate and feel the emotions that go with the feelings. That's a new concept for many people. But it's the emotions that balance the hormones, not the feeling. Feeling is a doorway. You can say, oh, I feel like nobody likes me. All right, that is not going to increase your estrogen, maybe a little bit, because somebody's listening to you. But if you say, I feel sad that my friend didn't listen to me at all, you feel an emotion, then that means your estrogen levels are going up. That's why we have to learn that for boys, if they're getting emotional, they need to temporarily take time to not talk, instead do something. Talking when you're emotional only increases estrogen, and boys can easily go over to the emotional side, be angry and throw tantrums and whatever, and what they need is not to ask them more questions and whatever, but to distract them from their emotions temporarily, get them to do something that they're good at. This is why boys need sports, they need activities, and girls need them too. But I'm just saying for boys, for their emotional balance and hormonal balance, We need to shift from thinking boys need what girls need. And lots of therapy today and psychology all sort of is biased towards what women need, because mainly women go to therapy. 90% of the people who go to therapy are women, so therapists all learn what works on women. 10%, the men that go, either they're going through a big crisis, in which case their estrogen levels are super high and therapy will be very helpful, or they're just too stuck on their female side and they're not going to make any progress. They need to learn to become masculine, which is, a lot of the things people say is horrible, the old conditioning, but be tough, don't cry, you know what? There's times to be tough and there's times not to cry, there's times to be strong and get the problem done, then you soften after that. There's a wisdom, some of this old-fashioned wisdom that was there, but it is old-fashioned and everything needs to be updated. I'm totally for updating things, but not to negate the wisdom of the past.
I just was looking at the time. Unfortunately, we've only got about 2 more minutes, but I just want to share with everybody out there, because I'm somebody who subscribes to your website. Again, for those out there, it's marsvenus.com, and I want you to know how much I appreciate the valuable information you provide. And for everybody out there, I know that this week, John's website is doing a special group of shows that's directed towards parents. So, in fact, so again, if you get a chance, go to the website. And this week, I think on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, it's going to be touching on ADHD. So it's going to be touching directly on the subject that we're talking about, which is staying focused in a hyper world, and the things that you can do if you believe that you or your children have ADHD. So, first, John, I just want to thank you, and also. I also believe that life is so much about our relationships, across the board. And John, I want you to know, I'm looking forward to attending one of your relationship seminars. Can you share a little bit, just give us about a minute of sharing a little bit about what they're going to entail? Oh,
it's a 3-day relationship seminar where you can come if you're single or if you're couples, if you're going through a crisis, if you're just having a good relationship and you want it to be, better and make sure the passion stays alive. I give talks, we do little discussion groups, people ask me questions, and then I eventually start bringing some couples up front and work with them. There's certainly, the seminars are too big for everybody to come up, and not everybody wants to come up. It takes a little courage to come up, but I get up, I work with people, and I no longer do personal counseling. I get more effectiveness by just bringing a few people up in the room and counseling their relationships. And what's universally the case around the world is when I take 2 or 3 relationships up front in the room, every single person has those challenges. We're all experiencing the similar challenges, and when you see me working with a few people, sometimes couples get more benefit because they don't have to take it personally. They can sort of look within themselves and see their mistakes up there on stage rather than having to look inside themselves. So it's a wonderful experience. It's playful, it's fun, it's good music, and I have a good time. I love doing it. Also, we do one for women only, one for men only, and I also do one on just a whole class on how to meditate as well, because that's a big part of my life. All right.
John, thank you so much for being here. Is there anything that's coming up next that we should know about?
Well, I think you mentioned it, which is really wonderful at the website. Every day there's another talk I give, an hour to an hour and a half talk. Usually you get the good stuff right at the beginning, so you don't have to watch the whole thing. But it is available, and people should check that out. It's called John Gray Every Day, and it's free.
All right. Well, John, thank you so much for coming on. You are welcome anytime. If you have anything else coming up, please let us know. We would love to have you on, and I look forward to meeting you in person as well at one of the seminars.
Thank you so much. I'll look forward to that as well.
All right. And for everybody out there, please be sure and put on your calendar and tune in every Monday when we will bring you guests that will inspire, educate, and in some cases entertain. And please visit our archives of past shows at answersforthefamily.com, or you can subscribe to the show through iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube. And if you like what you hear, please leave a review. It will help us reach more people, and it's an opportunity for us, again, to make a positive difference for others. The next time you're on Facebook and Twitter, please remember to stop by our page, check out some of our latest posts. If you like them, please like us and continue to spread the word. Be good human beings, and be with us again next week on Answers for the Family.
You're listening to Answers for the Family with Alan Cardoza. right here on LA Talk Radio.